Hello there. What is going on, everybody? Today we're talking about lost FFG expansions. Will we ever see them? This is going to be a multi-part video. I've seen this question posed a lot lately in multiple formats. A lot of people asking about it from different points of view. So I wanted to just make one overarching video that was going to talk about it for all of the FFG games that transferred over to Atomic Mass, talking about lost expansions. And you may be asking, what are lost expansions? I'm going to talk about that in this video and why we may or may not see it, and basically the good news and the bad news part of that question. If you guys are new here to the channel, we would love to have you stick around. We talk a lot about Star Wars and tabletop games and science fiction tabletop games and Star Trek and all kinds of other science fiction stuff. So if you like spaceships, dudes on a map, and miniatures and board games and tabletop gaming, this is a great place for you to be. I'd love to have you stick around. We also do giveaways all the time. If you want to have a chance to enter to win any of those, you just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. Another giveaway will be starting very soon. So stick around for more details as that shows up. So let's go ahead and talk about what are the lost FFG expansions that people sometimes talk about, whether it's X-Wing, Armada, or Legion. There was a transition from Fantasy Flight to Atomic Mass games, and when that happened, there was definitely content and there were plans that Fantasy Flight Miniatures, as a sub-studio under FFG, had for these games that obviously did not come to fruition. And in its place, you had the Atomic Mass games, version of these games, which for some was entirely new additions, and for others was nothing at all, or digital content, or a discontinuation, or a reprint, or a lot of different stuff happened to these games under Atomic Mass games that would have eventually happened in different forms under Fantasy Flight. But a lot of people are asking the question lately, what happened to the stuff that Fantasy Flight was working on? This question happens a lot more for Star Wars Armada, but it does also sometimes happen for X-Wing and Legion. And so I'm going to talk about kind of all three games. But one thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to break any NDAs and certain confidential agreements I have with people, even if it's not technically an NDA, because to be frank, yes, I do know about stuff for all three games that was going to be that was planned under FFG. But getting into specifics is stuff that I can't quite do. So in some games I've had NDAs for, and then other ones things that were told to me in confidence that I'm not going to necessarily break trust, because again, I'm still kind of hoping to work with people in the tabletop gaming industry in the in the future. So and again, it's just not who I am. I don't want to necessarily break confidence to a certain extent. So with that being said, I'll talk loosely about the different games and what some of the plans were. And there's also good news at the end of this, in that, well, let me just do the good news right away. The good news is we did get a lot of the lost FFG content, a lot of the lost FFG expansions. Armada got another wave, which that one was already at the printing presses anyway. X-Wing got a couple extra ships, everything from the Mandalorian to the Z95s and Cad Bane. There were a lot more ships that came out under X-Wing that were originally started under FFG, that AMG was able to bring across the finish line. And there was also a lot of stuff that Legion had that had started under FFG. They had brought one of the designers, Luke Eddy, over, and he was able to continue to work on Legion and helped bring a lot of that stuff. Not everything, but he was able to bring an awful lot of that initial planning across the finish line with Atomic Mass games. So one part of this is we did get it. It just happens to have the AMG sticker on there instead of the Fantasy Flight sticker. But and I preface that because, again, just because you didn't get something doesn't mean you didn't get anything. So it's worth looking at. Yes, we did get a lot of stuff. AMG didn't turn off X-Wing on day one. They didn't turn off Armada on day one. If they would have, we would only have those Clone Wars starters for Armada. We would have quite a few less ships for X-Wing. And for example, Now, I do know that there was some things that were changed. Actually, a decent number of things that were changed with AMG and Legion coming across the finish line, and what we have today versus what FFG had planned. One of those things, and I'm not going to go into too many specifics, but Shadow Collective would have looked a little different. But one of those things is that there would have been more upgrades with with certain units, with expansions in general, instead of like you would still have seen like more upgrades that weren't unique upgrades that only that unit could take, but you would have seen upgrades in the expansions still. AMG kind of put a stop to that. That's one of the things that that was still planned to happen. That was an AMG decision. So but that doesn't mean we won't ever see them. So that's one of those things where we may still see certain upgrades. I know of at least one unit that had upgrades that were kind of designed to make it work, and it's possible that some of those upgrades could still come out in a new card pack and stuff like that. So some things may have just been pushed farther to the right. So in the case of Legion, some of that stuff is definitely still possible, although we did probably get 90% of what was already planned under FFG. There was another game mode that was planned under FFG also that AMG kind of did a different version of. So if you look at the Spec Ops, that's that's an AMG design, but there was FFG had something loosely around the lines of that was also in the works as well. So a lot of the Legion stuff did come across the finish line. Some of it changed, warped a little bit. As far as X-Wing goes, there was also another game mode planned for X-Wing, and I don't think it's to the point where there's like files, and I don't think it ever made it to playtesting. It was very, very early, but would have been very, very cool. And there's other files. There's some interesting things that that never got to see the light of day. But again, a lot of that was in planning. Most of the stuff that was at least play tested and across had gotten a significant development, and particularly to the point of having miniatures designed and pushed to the factories. All that stuff was able to continue and made its way through. I think the last thing they had to bring in Brooks Fluger-Levitt to kind of contract on and help finish up. So that was pretty cool that they kind of bring that last one across. As far as Armada goes, there's not a whole lot of specifics I can share. I know there were some point rebalances that were planned. There was definitely something that was going to come through. I think there's a lot of stuff that I think we can all just look at and see that was obviously planned. A lot of those traits, those keywords that are built into ships, that was obviously something that they planned to do a lot more with. It's been talked about. Obviously, there were plans for other things like Lucre Hulks and Eta 2s. There was more squadrons planned. There were more ships planned as well. And this is all stuff that was kind of hidden in plain sight. You can see the evidence of this all over the game as it applies to what we have right now, especially with the Clone Wars and those starters and the new booklets. There's art that doesn't correspond to anything that's in the game yet. You can see certain squadrons in the art that obviously were planned. You can see, ships. You can see keywords that don't do anything that were obviously planned. And you can see cards that don't even function because they're required to have a certain unit with a certain keyword that doesn't even exist in the entire faction. So there were definitely a lot more plans for at least one or two more waves of Armada. Now, the truth is that Armada didn't have a terribly long lifespan as far as additional waves of expansion content to come out. Armada was already one of those games that was it was selling, and it was selling well, but it also was time consuming and expensive to make. So it wasn't like one of the hottest lines. It was just a good, reliable line. And that meant that it was still going to get stuff, but not a whole lot more. And they were quickly coming to a point where they had kind of exhausted the canon options for ships. And so Armada would have been probably one of those games that would have been called a complete game within about 2 more years of Fantasy Flight kind of having it, I think. But the thing is, they would have been able to do another campaign box. They would have been able to do more, another wave or two, and then gotten it to a point where they could call it a complete game with maybe like one send-off wave. Because Fantasy Flight used to end, when they would end a game, they would end it usually in a really good way. The only one that really didn't get ended in a really good way was Imperial Assault, because they had more stuff planned for Imperial Assault that they could not do. So, all that being said, there was some more things that were planned under Fantasy Flight Games, but none of them were, with the exception of Armada, none of them were like too critical. The big thing is we got a lot of that stuff. I'm really glad that AMG didn't cut off Armada right when they got it, because we would have 4 less ships, in the Clone Wars, which would have basically, those factions would have been dead. I mean, they're already, don't have nearly as much depth as the Imperial and the Republic do. I'm sorry, the Rebellion and the Empire do, but still, they did help bring some of the lost Fantasy Flight expansions across the finish line for all 3 games, and at least in the case of Legion, they have continued, and sort of in a different direction, but a lot of what was already planned did actually come out. So hopefully that answered those questions. If you came to this video expecting that it was going to be like I was going to spill all the beans on all of the, the hidden gems for Fantasy Flight content and stuff like that, I'm sorry. Hopefully the title didn't mislead, but that's the good news is this is a kind of a world where we did get a lot of that, and there's always the chance that if these games kind of get picked up again by Fantasy Flight, a different Asmodee studio, or get sold or picked up by somebody else, that some of that stuff would come to light. Now, another part of this question is people have asked, is there a chance of getting like the devs who worked on these games to come back and tell us, give us the files, or to talk about what was the plan for those games? I will say this. There's not much of a chance of that. There is not much of a chance of that. And trust me, I've tried. No, and there's reasons for that. A lot of these developers still want to continue to work in the board game industry. And so, the stuff that was worked on and the stuff that were planned out, a lot of that is, property of Asmodee. So it's not necessarily theirs to distribute. And of course, even if they weren't giving out files, if they were talking about, we were going to do this ship with, and its role was going to be this, and it would have costed somewhere around here, even to talk about it from a design perspective like that would still be inappropriate as it applies to the industry. So unless you're, retiring from board game design altogether and you're never going to try and work again, you probably don't want to break those agreements and those trusts, because that can have an impact on license holders and licensees and licensors and that whole, trust design space. So you're probably not going to see former designers from these games come out and talk about, what they were going to do with these games and what the plan was. Unfortunately, you're just not going to see that. So, again, a lot of people have been asking these questions in different forms, and I wanted to just sort of address it and hopefully provide some clearance and some guidance on, and maybe just, kind of shake the tree a little bit and be like, look, we did actually get a lot of the FFG stuff. In short, the stuff that we didn't get, for the most part, it was stuff that was still very much like experimental, like hadn't even been play tested yet, for the most part. So, but the things I have heard about seemed like they would have been cool, though. So, in another life, where FFG retained all of those games, or maybe where Marvel Crisis Protocol moved under Fantasy Flight, which probably would have been my preferred way of handling it, then that would have been really good for Star Wars gaming. But at least one of the 3 games survives. So that's just a look at some of the lost FFG expansion content, and will we ever get it? We already did. We got all that we're going to get. So there you go. Hopefully you found this video helpful or entertaining at all, and love to have you stick around. And if not, then I'm sorry I wasted your time. May the force be with you. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are amazing. And as always, live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. And so say we all. The spice must flow. You can't take the sky from me. And always wash your socks.